In this 25th anniversary interview, show creator Joel Hodgson, along with producer Jim Mallon and other cast and crew members, detailed the story of how MST3K came to be, how Joel got his start building robots, the improvisational nature of the first episodes, and much more. Let's watch.
Job one was always movie riffing. That's really was the clearest thing about Mystery Science Theater. It just wouldn't exist when you think about a narrative about just a guy and robots in a show. It may or may not have worked, but the heart of it is movie riffing. The thing that people loved about Mystery Science Theater, the reason why movie riffing is going on without Mystery Science Theater is that it works. And so to me, that was really the charge that kind of powered all these other things that came along. If you look at my stand-up, I'm like doing, it was really my stage self at the time, but it's really different than the way I performed on camera for Mystery Science Theater. My explanation is just, when you're doing TV, it's much more intimate. You're just in a room with a few people, and so you can kind of be who you are. It's not like I'm doing my act in front of 200 people. It was really more closer to who I am, I guess.
I just made it. It's the world's only electric bagpipes, all right?
You know, you get to absorb all the things that are around you, all the ideas and all the voices and all the things that our people are carrying on about in the writer's room. You know, it's like, I watch some of these Mystery Science Theaters and I'm doing dialects I can't do now. It's just that I was around Kevin and Trace, and those guys are really good at doing voices, so I could kind of mimic that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think those things are wonderful.
As a character, you know, and as a guy who's kind of the front of a show and a group of writers, you get to absorb all those things. You get to be all those things, and you can kind of like, it makes you much bigger, I think. If you were to meet me in real life, you might go, "Where's Joel? I don't see," you know, it's like they think of me as a different guy, you know, than I really am. It's kind of like Flipper and the real dolphin that played Flipper. It was an amplified version of myself. I felt comfortable, and we were winning at Mystery Science Theater. We were succeeding. So that made me take more and more risks, made me do more and more voices, you know, try to sing, things that I just don't do in real life, but I felt like it was working, so I would do it.
Oh, yeah, an old expression. I know one of those. There was an old man from Nantucket.
No,
who's...
bonk.
Ow.
Sorry. I really feel like all I did was make the robot. I made the visual piece of Crow, what he looked like. The only other reference I have is there was a song that I got the name Crow from, which was the Jim Carroll band. The poet Jim Carroll made these great, like, couple of great rock albums in the late 70s, and he's got this song called Crow, and I just said, that's who this character is. So that's really all kind of my part of Crow. The rest of it is trace.
Crow started out pretty simple. You know, if you look at the puppet, it doesn't have a lot of animation. It's just got a mouth that moves. And Joel wanted me to say, yes, Joel Hodgson, after every line.
Is that so, Joel Hodgson? Mm-hmm. I think that guy needs an anti-spasmodic.
I think I said to him, oh, talk like the robot from Lost in Space. Like, thank you, Joel Robinson. And if you look at the early KTMA days, he's kind of talking like that.
So it became very, very limiting in what I could do, especially in the theater. I think I abandoned that pretty quickly so that, you know, I could be more relaxed and do other voices and things.
And that all came from KTMA, you know, it's like he found his way into it. And if you look at Crow, you're really looking at, you know, trace.
How his character changed was, you know, as the writers gave him more and more goofy stuff to do, like he became a screenwriter, you know, Earth versus Soup, that kind of thing. So nothing really stayed rock solid, you know, in that respect.
I think Crow is like mostly trace, and I think of Crow as being more childlike than Tom Servo. I think Tom Servo is kind of more adult. When Josh started with Tom Servo, he kind of gave him this Marvin the Martian voice. He talks like this, and he did that for a while.
Here I come to save the day.
And he came up with the name Tom, like Tom is in quotation marks. It's Tom Servo, you know, and you used to get a top 40 list at the record store, and it would say WDUZ, Boobala Allen, you know, it was like the DJ's name. And so that was Josh. At the end of the first season, Josh decides to leave, and we're kind of faced with a dilemma.
Josh left. I'd been writing for the show. People seemed to like what I was doing, enjoyed my sense of humor, realized I had a decent voice for doing things. And I just walked into the office where Jim and Joel were there, and I said, you guys, I really kind of like to do Tom Servo. What do you think? Do you think I could do it? And they both said to me, yeah, let's give it a try.
I thought that was an awesome idea, like a guy who, you know, who I didn't know as a performer could like do that. Kevin takes Tom Servo and he's just like gangbusters. And also, he's like great in the writing room. I mean, Kevin knows like everything.
I had to make a transition from the Josh stentorian-voiced chick magnet Tom to more of the kind of oddly mercurial, weepy, insecure.
He's like Ted Knight from Mary Tyler Moore. He's like Sebastian Cabot. He's like this portly guy.
You could tell he's chubby. I mean, Tom in his mind is always chubby. And being a portly man myself, it seemed only fitting that I'd add that aspect to his personality, sort of the classic dumpy, chubby guy.
When Kevin, you know, took over, he brought a whole other thing, but he built on what Josh did. But it turns out that then Tom Servo became Kevin.
Tom was always an amalgamation of the writers, and the success of those characters is owed to the people who wrote the character.
Hey, check it out. Here's Tom Servo modeling the Jimmy J.J. Walker.
Keeps me walking, standing upright, turns an ordinary stroll into dynamite!
I take very little responsibility for the personality of Tom because he was written that way.
My original premise for Joel and his relationship with the bots is a lot like ventriloquists and their dummies. You know, the ventriloquists are kind of represent restraint, and the dummy kind of represents the id, you know, that wants to do stuff.
I still don't see how dressing in diaphanous robes and slapping each other around is gonna make Joel happy.
Well, don't hurt yourself thinking about it. Now shut up and wrestle, Spinach Chin.
What the Sam Scratch is going on around here?
I think, too, it's a little similar to Dave Seville and the Chipmunks, you know. I guess that's another memory of mine that I loved as a kid, was this guy who kind of kept things going and stuff like that. Gypsy was kind of like, I wanted to make, you know, I just always loved the Muppets and how he did those brilliant giant puppets like Sweetums and stuff like that, or Snuffleupagus, where there's just so ambitious and so imaginative and just filled the frame. And so I wanted to do that with Gypsy. I wanted a great big giant robot. And with that came a lot of problems because she was so big and just really hard to maneuver. And so that was kind of like a self-limiting element to Gypsy, why we weren't able to use her more.
Josh played the original Gypsy on KTMA, and he did an inhaled voice for Gypsy. He inhaled as he spoke, which really does a weird thing to your vocal cords. I think it was challenging for him.
Until they bumped into a Plymouth, and then they got out of the van and took turns starving.
I think he kind of called her a learning disabled dragon when he started. I'll just do that all the way, a learning disabled dragon or a dim-witted dragon.
When we got to making the show for the network, though, we thought we should definitely make it its own character with its own performer. And I don't remember how I got hooked into that, but it was probably because there just wasn't another warm body.
And Jim built a really cool rig that used a harness from like a marching band that held a bass drum, and he got all these machine parts, and he made it so he could, you know, do more with Gypsy, but unfortunately it was just that if Gypsy was smaller, she would have been in a lot more, and I think her character would have developed more. But again, just giving the limits of the set, we just weren't able to do more with her. Cambot was really based on my premise of what I called the motivated camera, meaning every camera in the world of Mystery Science Theater is a camera. It's not like it's this objective God's point of view. Rocket number 9 and Cambot are both functions of that, saying, oh, let's just say it's a character so we can direct Cambot.
Hey, there's a ship coming into range.
Willikers, he's right, Cambot. Give me rocket number 9, pronto.
And I just took one of those, it was basically from Star Wars, it was a walker action toy, like for Kenner's Star Wars action figures. And I just I think I built a new head for it and painted it red, or painted it like kind of day-glow orange. And that became the original Cambot. When we did the pilot for Mystery Science Theater, I really thought that Mystery Science Theater was like a pirate radio station. The premise that there's a guy up there in space on the satellite with robots. He's circling the planet and he's like breaking into your TV channel. And after the pilot, it was like probably the second, I don't know if it was the second or third episode, Jim Mallon says, I showed this to a friend of mine and he thinks it needs a theme song. I thought about it and I just said, you know, you're exactly right. That's really what we need. And the idea of the Mads really came from the line in the theme song, his bosses didn't like him, so they shot him into space. And then when we put that into the opening with the theme song, we just had Josh and Trace kind of in the edit bay, kind of behaving like scientists and like pressing a button or something. They're the guys who shot him into space.
Dr. Forrester started out with like absolutely no like art direction. You know, it was just Josh and I in our street clothes. I think we had lab coats and maybe some glasses, but it's basically us.
The thing that made me a fan of Trace before I asked him to come work on Mystery Science Theater, I saw him do this piece that he did that wasn't really stand-up. It was more like a performance piece of this weird, like, mad doctor named Dr. Quabius.
And Joel had seen that and he said, oh, do that voice. It was more of a kind of a Gregory Peck area of voice.
And we sent him transmission after transmission of Jacques Cousteau movies.
Once we got more money, once we got to the channel, then we actually got real costumes. Joel had the Forrester colored lab coat made. Aside from that, I had already had this mustache from a character that I did. I happened to have a pair of glasses that matched the lab coat, so I said, okay, well that works.
And then Josh's thing was Dr. Lawrence Earhart, and And he just was off and running with that, doing this character.
I'm happy out!
I'll file this.
So Josh is leaving. It's after the first year, he's deciding to go to LA. And we're left with these two holes in the cast. Frank came in and was just unbelievable in that role of TV's Frank.
So another quick impression for you, the drummer from Def Leppard, ladies and gentlemen.
And that's just something I gave him, because I always loved that when they annotate a celebrity by saying, TV's Donna Reed, you know, or whatever, you know, it's like this kind of gloss they'd put on things. And that's kind of Frank. He's kind of loves show business, and he loves inflating everything about him. And so that just seemed to naturally fit who he was.
Oh, that's great, Joel. Very amusing.
And then as the show evolved and the characters got goofier, you know, by the time Frank and I are in this kind of weird relationship domestically that you don't quite really know what these guys are all about, it just became very farcical and goofy and a lot less stiff, I think.
And wouldn't it be hard on all those Flintstone kids if their favorite cartoon vitamin came, turn Frank, life-size? Balls in your court, Joel.
The only thing we discussed, Trace and I, about character stuff was we both talked about The Great Race and how much we loved that movie, and that the relationship between Dr. Fate and Max was something we really liked, and that was what we were kind of hoping for Frank and Forrester.
Frank, shut up! Enjoy!
We started adding additional characters because we sort of had to, because it would have gotten pretty boring if it was always just the bots interacting with Joel or with the mad scientists, because, you know, there's only so far you can go with that. And I think just as writers, we felt like we had to break out of that.
And I remember Jim Mallon approaching me and saying, can we come up with a character for Mike as part of this? And I kind of felt like it was realized in just him coming in and being a character.
Everyone was on camera already, so Mike was like the natural go-to guy to bring in, to do those guests.
Anytime we wanted to put in a character, it would just be Mike. I mean, if you notice, we're not really dropping in anybody else in the writer's room into that spot. It's Mike. Mike's became the guy.
One week he was the amazing colossal man, which is wonderful. He did that very well.
Mike played Michael Feinstein. It was one of the, as I can recall, one of the first times that was really clear what acting strengths he had, and did this kick-ass version of Michael Feinstein playing a song in our studio, and it just brought the roof down during the production time. People wanted to see replays of it 2 or 3 times in a row.
And I don't have to tell you two gentlemen that American musical theater was never quite the same thing.
When I think about Mike Nelson doing Michael Feinstein, it occurs to me that my only exposure to a lot of these people is Mike Nelson's interpretation of who these people are.
And then everybody's like totally psyched to do What Can We Do Next?
I think we just would get something stuck in our craw about a certain personality or actor or whomever, and we just had to play it out.
Jack Perkins was hosting a show on, I guess it was A&E, and we were all kind of fans of watching him.
He's such a strong icon, you know, the friendly, genial guy who introduces someone else on A&E back when they were young, and it seemed like we just goofed on him.
So we got this idea of writing it into the script, and I think it was Chris Ballas, special effects makeup artist, who created the teeth and the wig and the whole look.
I want to apologize, Frank, Dr. F, but I was at a wondrous Thanksgiving concert.
Mike's impression is not, you know, like a lot of great caricatures. It's not a dead-on impression of Jack Perkins. It's his own take on what Jack Perkins is.
But we kept bringing him back because he was so damn funny. You know, he'd appeared in the Thanksgiving marathon.
Perkins, what the hell are you doing here, you pedantic, leathery old...
And then we spun him off into his own show.
Probably our most recurring character, if I think about it. He probably showed up in more stuff than any of our other recurring characters.
Well, another Mike appearance is Torgo. That's probably one of the most famous.
He was so damn funny. He had everything down, the way he looks around the room instead of looking at anybody in particular. And the knee walk and the voice. He was a better Torgo than Torgo.
No. Thank you. I'll get your change.
What I remember about doing Torgo is that it always took a really long time because Torgo moves very slowly. And Mike is nothing if not an accomplished exacting actor, and he nailed that perfectly. And I remember those takes taking forever, and he was fearless about not rushing it.
Say, you know, it's been 2 hours, but it's still pretty warm.
So he became sort of, you know, not constantly recurring character, but kept going back to him. And, you know, he played that quote-unquote important role when Frank Conniff finally left the show, coming back as Torgo the White to escort Frank to second banana heaven.
Join me, Frank, of TV, in a beautiful place where all the lackeys and toadies and whipping boys are forever safe and free from their oppressors.
But then we started bringing more people in as we got more elaborate.
Pearl was, we wanted her to be an objectionable woman. I mean, what I thought of when she started evolving was, this is Norman Bates's mother.
Trace and her were really funny together because Dr. Forrester, and again it shows how good of an actor Trace is.
Personal slave, that's probably why you had me.
Because he started to crumble in front of his mom and showed all these layers of just like failure.
And yeah, when she started, she was a strong taste. You know, she had that, you know, Minnesota frizz hairdo and the cat eye glasses. And I don't know, people notice it too much, but she had a mustache. There was a lot of Clayton in Pearl. You know, you could say, when you look at the whole story universe, maybe there's a lot of Pearl and Clayton, but you know, this isn't a comic book. This is, you know, a puppet show.
What was absolutely magical and wonderful about it was just sort of what we wanted to do with this thing that we had.
I think that became an ongoing joke in the writer's room, is we're gonna write you into a sketch.
That was one of the reasons why we built the Hexfield view screen, was a way for us to always have characters coming on to the Satellite of Love, you know, in a very unique way.
The first time I was called upon to do some acting was a Christmas episode, and I was a Nelson family member in the Hexfield with Mary Jo and Tim. I was the teenage son and just basically had to stand there and look bored and like, it's a waste of time.
I love that they made Paul Churston into Scratch, that demon. Like, I just thought, that's so funny. It's funnier if you know Paul and just how great it is that he did that.
Paul Chaplin played Pitch, which was a character in the movie Santa Claus. And it's the devil, and he's in red, I don't know what we had him in, a leotard or a really tight Union Jack suit. I can't remember, but Paul had the perfect build for it.
I mean, I'm sure it just happened that we had this idea, and in the writing room, hey, Paul, you could play Pitch because, you know, you actually could be made up to look like Pitch. It probably just came out of the writing room, and you wanted, sure, I'll do that.
And yeah, I got to play Santa Claus against Pitch because of the Santa Claus, the movie that we had done. And I think to this day, Paul is probably still disturbed by the fact that I picked him up and spun him around like he was a toy.
I mean, it was hilarious, at least to us. And I think that energy carried through the lens. I think people kind of picked up on that.
When we needed a lady character, you know, before Mary Jo was there, Bridget was there, and she played lots of lady characters.
Bridget did the most amazing job embodying Mr. B Natural.
And I embody the spirit of music in you and you.
Miss B Natural? We don't know. That short film was ahead of its time. Messing with our gender expectations.
What was really fun about specials we did, like Thanksgiving specials, we brought a lot of these characters back and have a meal together.
Frank invited all of these characters that had been on the show over the years to Thanksgiving dinner. And Mr. B Natural shows up, and she's creeping everybody out except for Jack Perkins, who's slowly getting drunk and ends up hitting on Mr. B Natural. And it's, again, one of those very memorable moments. There are two of my favorite bit players making out on Mystery Science Theater.
And I think that became part of what was really fun for the fans, is not only seeing which people were playing this, but getting to know these characters. And the other simple fact is the performers were really good.
We wanted to start differently with the new iteration of Mystery Science Theater, leaving one network, coming to another. And we were no longer in Deep 13. We had broken out of there, and we put them into that trope of the ape future. And there was no trace left anymore, and we didn't want to make Mike do triple duty. So I became sort of like the spokesperson for the apes.
Of course, as you know, every evil nemesis needs some sort of sidekick, and Professor Bobo was Pearl Forrester's sidekick. And I think he got birthed by the idea of the Planet of the Apes premise.
He came out of the mold, you know, very sort of like Dr. Zaius.
Complicated than that.
That was more of the model for Bobo. It was just very important, self-important, stentorian sort of fellow who said banana, you know, and talked like that and had the glasses on, and he was an actual scientist.
But right away, Kevin, given his gregarious and ham-like qualities, turns this to a very noble but very monkey-like creature who gets just as interested in picking nits and eating food as he is being an evolved talking ape.
Now we have, you know, Pearl and Bobo, and I think we just thought we needed a third. And the next stop that we made was the Observer Planet. And we had the three observers there. And so there's Mike again, and there's Paul, and there's Bill, and all playing observers. And it just made sort of sense for Bill to go on to be Brain Guy.
Bill just has this way of doing these straight lines so dry and so Niles Crane-like that it just, it would crack me up.
What are you implying?
I'm implying B.O.
B.O.? That's absurd. I don't even have a body.
He took to it very well. He has a lot of great acting chops. He could do the observer sort of presentation and accent so well. And it was a chance for him to sort of stand out in a way that he couldn't as Crow.
For a lot of our host segments, we used crew members. And I think that was, A, it was easy. B, I think we were kind of lazy about having to go out and audition people.
I think the very first thing that I did was I was in the Earth versus Soup, like a little sketch where we were talking about this film and sort of saying whether it was good or bad.
Hold everything. The castle's calling, and something's wrong.
I was approached very casually about playing Steffi, the babysitter. I think it was just kind of one of those things where you know, what's on hand? You know, Mary Jo's got someplace else to be, like, what's on hand? Bees is on hand. Bees, you want to come in front of the camera? We've got, you know, some time to kill. And it was a little nerve-wracking, just kind of like trying to keep up with the boys and trying to fill in Mary Jo's shoes, but I really enjoyed it.
There's
Quiet,
no doubt
no
about
bark.
that. It would be delicious on a train, but a plane, I'd have to think about a plane. Maybe substitute bacon for ham. That sounds kind of nice.
Not like, please, can I be in another show? Can I do some more acting? It's just kind of, you're at the read through and they say your name and you're kind of like, okay, time management. How am I going to build this? And then you go over here for wardrobe and be on hand for puppets and, you know.
In your country, the men shave. In my country, we wish the women would shave.
As we went along, and it always happened that, you know, movies would present us with characters that we just found hysterical. And we find ourselves aping them. And of course, when we'd say, this is something we have to incorporate into the live action stuff in the show, put it in a host segment. And Ortega was one of those. Poor Paul, we always gave him the creepiest characters to play. You know, he played Pitch, he's playing Satan, pretty much. He played Pearl's boyfriend who jingles change and makes vague references to banging her.
Just between you and me, I wouldn't be expecting her home tonight.
Mother,
And then he played Ortega, was this creepy mumbling guy who always had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth, and he was like one step below a carny.
I remember thinking that if it was popular and they wanted to keep bringing him back, that well, I was happy about that, but I couldn't count it as a testament to my acting skills. It was, you know, put a bunch of stuff on my face and I'll grunt for a while.
He was called as a witness to the trial, if I remember right, when Mike was on trial for blowing up the world. And we also put him on the phone bank when Pearl decided to turn her enterprise into a public television thing and raise money through fundraising, because she realized people would call in and just give her money.
And so just these little things would come up, little parts that were pretty simple, and so it was just kind of fun to don a dorky costume and go do something funny.
Part of what made that space so special is there was just so much energy, positive energy, and people playing off each other and enjoying themselves, and that we're pulling in our entire staff in any roles we can.
And so it was fun for us to be able to have these little bit players along with our regular stock characters.
Thank you.